I taught this to a group program today, and I also want to share it with YouTube. It is a bit of a complex topic, but sometimes we need realistic and approachable solutions, and occasionally it's nice to have the grand concept of things, and because it really opens our eyes. I know that it's hard to integrate, but some regardless, sometimes it's good to have reminders of this. So, what I talked about in my classes today is what is the secret to life? So, the secret to happiness I know is unattached giving, which is something I covered in YouTube a few weeks ago. It's the video on the 무주상 보시, and the video I think is titled like the art of generous giving or something like that. And now, like, what is the secret of life? And I replied that the secret of life is that there is no life. Now, let's explain this. This is not some far-fetched thing that I came up with my head. It is the teaching from a sutra, which is like a text, sacred text, holy text, scripture or whatever. That's the concept of sutra, and this particular concept is from the Heart Sutra. Heart Sutra is in Korean Panya Shimgyong, and in when you translate that, it roughly means the core sutra of infinite wisdom. It roughly translates to that. And core happens to share the same character as heart, and so I think it got translated to Heart Sutra in English. But nevertheless, that is the sutra we are referring to today. So if you are interested, just search Wikipedia for Heart Sutra. Now, the Heart Sutra has to do with the three principles of existence. So, what are the Buddhist philosophy, not the Buddhist religion. Buddhist like about like the afterlife and how blah blah blah. Not that. Buddhist philosophy, now the mode of thinking and this pursuit of truth says in existence, three things are just kind of core to it. Uh, Number one is impermanence, and number two is suffering, and number three is the lack of the non-existence of self, non-existence in general, right? So what does that mean? Uh, Impermanence means nothing is guaranteed to stay forever. So in a year, seasons change, right? It can't stay summer forever. It can't stay winter forever. It can't stay spring forever. It can't stay autumn forever. It changes. I, when you look at my first video, I'm sure I have aged because again, I change. When you look at my room changes. My dog gets older as well, and my computer does as well, and everything, not like everything that exists is subject to change, and that is the concept of impermanence because nothing is like permanent, it just changes. But as human beings with will and thought, we want to impose our will and we want to try to control the ever changing. And control usually means we try to impart something and hold something in place while we try to get this in and get this in, or like we try to come up with ways to make A work correlate with B and then build a system around that. But everything changes. So the world does not bend to our will. Therefore, this is sad. And this is the mark of suffering. Like, our will doesn't really work well with impermanence because we have the will to kind of try to control it and try to understand, put it in like, terms that we feel like is permanent and such. And the lack of self is that if you really think about it, there is no concept of me. Like, what is me? Is it my name? My name is Billy, and there's other souls out there. So are all Billy souls me? No. Are all people, like, are all Korean people me? I'm Korean. No. So are all people with like two arms and legs me? No. So am I my genetic result? Well, there's thoughts and like my soul. There are intangible things in me. So am I those things? Am I a collection of that? Well, no. There's like still parts of me that are not completely described in discrete definitions. And if you break it down even more, I'm composed of biological matter, but that biological matter is composed of cells, and those cells are just atoms, and those atoms are found everywhere else, and those atoms are composed of neutrons, electrons, and protons, and they're all found everywhere else. So there's nothing really to call me, and me is a construct that I believe for myself. So I think this is my hair. So I think this is my YouTube channel. But is it? Right now I'm recording a video on my computer, but I'm talking to you as if you're gonna watch this on YouTube. But YouTube servers are like all everywhere in the world. But does that file exist? It's just a bunch of like bits. And it can be wiped away at any moment. And like it's just a bunch of silicons and semiconductors and such, right? So the more you go down and down and down and down and down, the more you realize it's like nothing. Protons and neutrons and electrons, when you go down to like the subatomic level, you find that it is composed of some things bound in space. And then when you break into the next layer of that something, you find that it is again a collection of things bound in space. And then when you identify one of those things and then you go in deeper, again, you find that it's a bunch of things bound in space. Which means the more you break it down, the more space you just find. And so that's the concept that as you go deeper and deeper, deeper, you find that there's just space. And what if you go, that's if you go down, right? What if you go up? Earth, and then our solar system, and then Milky Way, and then galaxies, and then there's like more of those, and then there's more collections of those, and then there's more collections of those, and more collections of those, right? So the world is infinite in both directions, both up and down. And so you just see that everything is just kind of like a thing that just coincidentally forms and then dissipates. So when we look at our lives, there is this like we think that there is life and then death, right? But if you think about it from the perspective of a wave and you're watching the waves crash at the beach, like each wave is different, right? It comes in and then it dissipates and then it comes in and then it dissipates and one wave comes in and then it dies and it the exact wave is never to be found again. But if you look at it from the perspective of the ocean or like the body of water, all it's doing is just like temporarily like spilling over as this earth spins around in relation with the moon, right? And the sun. So waves are just a really like narrowed down view of the phenomenon of the earth just like doing its thing. And so the concept of life and death is this really narrow part of this really large spectrum. And now we get caught up in that. And we think those are too significant. And so even in that like short life, I hear that if the entire history of the earth is one day, the history of humanity is like less than 5 minutes. And so your life and the things that you are concerned with that give you suffering are all just really like the tiniest minuscule things. And we attribute so much meaning to this and think this is the reason why we can't be happy. Now, this may sound like, oh, we're all insignificant, like, specks of dust and we're all meaningless. That's one way to look at it. But at the same time, it means that no matter what kind of a person you were born as, what kind of things have happened to you, you can always just look at it from a different perspective and realize that you are just totally free as a speck of dust anywhere. You're free to define your life however you choose, regardless of how you were born. Because in the grand scheme of things, it's not that significant. And so, this infinite vastness of the universe and the infinite vastness space of the subatomic particles and the things that go way below that level is basically your mind, right? It's your internal realm. That's how big your internal realm is. Because it contains all the life experiences that you ever had. And you know that if you really imagine it, you can imagine infinite multiverses of your life inside of your mind, and it will still have more room to imagine. All right? And yet, we look at this little real estate inside that vast space, and we think this little space controls our life. So that recognition and that realization of like, wow, like life is so much bigger than me. My mind is so much bigger than me. And now I could use this however I want. And like the concept of life and death are just one lenses of viewing the always changing nature of things. Stars are formed and then they die. But all it is bunch of like space and bunch of things floating around it, temporarily forming to something and then it dissipating. If you look at a life, it's just like what your mom ate, what your dad ate, becoming some cells, and then like them happen to colliding with each other, and then you becoming your own food source and metabolism, and it just like forms, and then it just dissipates, and then everything goes back to the earth again to be consumed by animals again, and by nature again, and then by other humans, and then it becomes another cell. So like, you are the universe and you are one. There is no life, there is no death, because you are already embodiment of it. But we do not recognize that all the time. Therefore, we devote from this infinite space, we devote ourselves into this little cage that we prepared for ourselves and look at what's inside that cage and think why that is we suffer. So the secret of life is that there is no life. There is no death. We already have transcended it. And the more we recognize it, and the more we can be awake when we catch ourselves attaching to these infinitely small particles of dust, the more opportunities to be completely detached and therefore boundlessly happy open up.